They called my brother the Golden One. My parents never said it out loud, they didn't need to. It was in every birthday cake with his name written in icing, while mine had candles with no words. It was in the way my mother introduced us at family dinners. "This is Daniel. He's in medicine." And then a pause, a small breath, before she'd add, "And this is my daughter, Sophie." Just Sophie. No context, no achievement attached. Just Sophie. As if my existence alone was already asking too much of her. I grew up in Mississauga, in a house that looked perfectly normal, from the outside brick front, two-car garage, a backyard my father mowed every Saturday morning like clockwork. My parents were both from the same small town in southern Ontario, married young, worked hard. My father spent 30 years as an insurance broker. My mother ran the household and volunteered at the church bazaar every November. By every external measure, they were decent people. And maybe they were. But decent people can still break you quietly, in ways that don't leave marks anyone can see. Daniel is 4 years older than me. He's 31 now. He was always the one who made things easy for them, played hockey through high school, got accepted to McMaster, finished his residency in internal medicine at Toronto General. He called every Sunday. He remembered birthdays. He was, in my mother's words, exactly what a son should be. She said that to her book club friends once, while I was clearing dishes in the next room. I was 17. I stood there holding a stack of plates and I thought, so what does that make me? I wasn't a difficult child. I didn't cause trouble. I got decent grades, stayed out of fights, came home on time. But I was quiet in a way my parents seemed to find inconvenient. I liked to read. I liked to take long walks along the waterfront in winter when everyone else stayed inside. I didn't play a sport or join student council or do the kinds of things that gave parents something to talk about at neighborhood barbecues. I was just there, taking up space. And I think that, to them, felt like a kind of failure. The worst part was that I understood it, even as it hurt me. Daniel was easy to love loudly. I required a slower, quieter kind of love. The kind that sits with you without needing to perform. My parents simply didn't have that in them. When I was 18, I told my mother I wanted to become a nurse. She looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "That's fine, Sophie. It's a stable job. Not proud, not excited, just fine, stable." The same tone she used when she said the weather would probably be fine for the weekend, functional, unremarkable. I enrolled in the nursing program at Ryerson. It was called Ryerson then, before the name change. I paid for my first year mostly through OSAP and a part-time job at a Tim Hortons on Ontario Street. My parents helped Daniel with his tuition every semester, without question, without paperwork, just an e-transfer on the 1st of September like it was a utility bill. When I asked about help for my second year, my father looked genuinely confused, like the thought hadn't occurred to him. He said they'd see what they could do. They gave me $800. Daniel's contribution that year, I found out later from a cousin, was $12,000. I didn't fight about it. I picked up extra shifts. I graduated with my BSCN on a Tuesday afternoon in June, in a gymnasium that smelled like floor wax and folding chairs. My parents came. My mother wore a dress I'd never seen before, the kind she saved for occasions that mattered. I thought maybe, just maybe, this would be one of them. Afterward, we went to the Mandarin on Dixie Road because Daniel said he was craving the buffet. Nobody asked where I wanted to go. My mother took exactly 2 photos of me in my gown. There are 47 of Daniel from his convocation. I know because I counted once, on a night I should have been sleeping. After I graduated, I got a position at Credit Valley Hospital in the cardiac care unit. It wasn't flashy work, but it was real work, the kind where you hold someone's hand at 3 in the morning when they're scared and their family hasn't arrived yet. The kind where you learn very quickly that the difference between a person living and dying sometimes comes down to whether someone was paying attention. I was good at it, my colleagues said so. My charge nurse, a woman named Margaret who had been doing this for 28 years, told me in my first performance review that I had the kind of clinical instinct you couldn't teach. I kept that sentence in the back of my mind for a long time on hard days. My parents didn't really understand what I did. My mother once told her neighbor that I worked at a hospital doing the routine stuff. My father told a family friend I was one of the nurses, not a doctor or anything. I stopped correcting them after a while. It cost me too much energy I needed for other things. What they did understand, clearly and completely, was Daniel's career. Every milestone was celebrated: his residency match, his first attending position, the condo he bought in Liberty Village. When he started dating a woman named Natalie, my mother texted me immediately. Daniel met someone wonderful. A lawyer. Can you believe it? I could believe it just fine. I texted back a heart emoji and put my phone face down on the counter. 3 years ago, something shifted in my life in a way I hadn't planned. I'd been working evenings on a community health project through the hospital, a volunteer initiative bringing basic health education to seniors in underserved areas in Peel region. We partnered with a few local organizations, did blood pressure checks, medication reviews, that sort of thing. What started as 8 volunteers and a borrowed van turned into something that surprised even me. We got a small grant from the region of Peel, then a larger one from the Ontario government's Health Equity Fund. Then a private donation from a foundation I'd written a cold proposal to at midnight after a double shift. Within 2 years, the program had a name: ClearPath Community Health, a part-time coordinator, and a roster of over 40 nurse volunteers across 3 cities. I didn't quit my hospital job. I kept both going for a long time, running on 6 hours of sleep and the particular stubbornness that comes from spending your whole life being told your efforts weren't quite enough. But ClearPath kept growing. We were eventually recognized by the Ontario Nurses Association as a model community program. The local paper in Brampton did a feature. A national nursing publication ran a short piece. None of this made me rich. We were a non-profit. But it meant something. It meant something to the 73-year-old man in Malton who found out he'd been having undiagnosed atrial fibrillation during one of our drop-in clinics. It meant something to the woman in Bramalea who hadn't seen a healthcare provider in 6 years and burst into tears when we took her blood pressure because she said she'd forgotten anyone cared. I didn't tell my family any of this. Not out of strategy, not out of spite. I just stopped offering them pieces of myself to dismiss. Every time I'd shared something before a promotion, a good review, a course I completed, it was received with a kind of polite disinterest that was worse than criticism. My mother would say, "That's nice, honey," and change the subject to Daniel. My father would nod and say, "Good for you," in the voice he used when he was watching the game, and you'd interrupted him. So I stopped. I kept ClearPath mine. I kept it quiet. I let it grow in the dark like something that didn't need their light to survive. This past November, Daniel called to tell me he was proposing to Natalie. I was genuinely happy for him. Whatever my complicated feelings about my family, Daniel had never been cruel to me directly. Passive. Yes, complicit in the way that people are when they benefit from a system without questioning it, but not cruel. I said congratulations, and I meant it. The engagement party was set for the last Saturday of January, at my parents' house in Mississauga. My mother called it a small family gathering which, in her vocabulary, meant 30 people. A catered spread from a local Lebanese restaurant she'd discovered, and enough flowers from Costco to fill a greenhouse. She asked me to come early to help set up. She asked Daniel to come whenever he was comfortable. I drove out on the Saturday morning in the kind of January that Ontario specializes in flat gray sky, road salt staining the wheel wells of every car on the 401. The temperature sitting at -14 before wind chill. I parked in the driveway behind my father's Camry and sat in my car for a moment, with the engine running. I had learned, over the years, to give myself that moment before walking into that house. A kind of quiet preparation. A small reminder that whatever happened inside, I knew who I was. My mother put me to work immediately. I arranged charcuterie boards while she managed the flower arrangements. She talked the whole time about Natalie's dress for the engagement photos, about the venue they were considering for the wedding, about how Daniel had been working so hard and deserved this happiness. I listened. I arranged the prosciutto in neat little folds, and I listened and I said, and that's lovely at appropriate intervals. Guests arrived around too. Aunts and uncles and cousins I saw once a year, the same neighbors who had watched Daniel and me grow up, a few of Daniel and Natalie's friends from the city. My Aunt Claire, my father's sister, found me early and hugged me warmly and asked about my work. I said it was going well. She said I looked tired. I said January would do that to you. She laughed and squeezed my hand and moved on. Natalie arrived with Daniel around 2:30, and she was everything my mother's text had suggested: warm, sharp-eyed, immediately at ease, in a room full of people she was meeting for the first time. She wore a cream-colored blazer and dark jeans, and she laughed easily. I introduced myself early, before the crowd got to them. She shook my hand and said, "I've heard so much about Daniel's family. It's so good to finally meet you." I said the same back, and I meant it, mostly. For the first hour, things were fine. Ordinary. The particular ordinary of a family event where I was present but not quite visible. Pleasant background noise. Useful when there were dishes to clear or a guest who needed directions to the bathroom. My mother gave a short speech around 4 o'clock. She talked about how proud she was of Daniel. About watching him become a man she was honored to call her son. She teared up exactly once, professionally, the way people do when they've rehearsed being moved. She thanked Natalie's family, who had come from Oakville. She said she hoped this house would always feel like home to Natalie. It was a lovely speech. Genuinely, it was. She did not mention me. I was standing 8 feet away, holding a glass of sparkling water. My cousin Aidan, who is 23 and notices everything, caught my eye across the room. He gave me the smallest look. Not pity, he knew I didn't want that. Just acknowledgement. A witness. After the speech, my father put on some music, and the room loosened up the way rooms do. I drifted toward the kitchen to check on the dessert trays. Natalie found me there a few minutes later, reaching past me for a napkin. "The squares are incredible. Did you make these?" she asked, picking up one of the shortbread pieces. I said my Aunt Claire had brought them. She nodded, then looked at me more directly. She had the look of someone assembling a thought carefully. "Can I ask you something? What do you do for work, I mean? Daniel mentioned you're in healthcare?" I said I was a registered nurse, cardiac care, Credit Valley. She nodded again, then her expression shifted slightly. "Do you have anything to do with a program called ClearPath? Community Health? Out of Peel Region?" I set down my glass. I said yes, I was the founder. The word landed differently than I expected. I had said it so rarely, to so few people, that it still felt strange in my mouth. Founder. Like it belonged to someone else. Natalie stared at me for a moment. "My firm did some pro bono legal work for a community health charity in Brampton last year. The woman who ran it, I only met her once at a funding meeting. I couldn't place the face, but your name." She stopped. "Sophie Mackenzie. You're Sophie Mackenzie from ClearPath." I said I was. She put the shortbread square down on the counter slowly. "Sophie. That program was cited in the Ontario Health Equity Review last spring. I read the whole report for a client file. They held it up as one of 3 models the province was considering for expansion." She shook her head slightly. "Daniel never said I didn't realize you were, he just said you were a nurse." I said that was also true. She laughed once, a short, disbelieving sound. Then she seemed to remember where she was and lowered her voice. "I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make this weird. I genuinely admire what you've built, the scale of what you've done with that funding, the reach. Our partners at the foundation talked about it for months." I thanked her. I said it had been a group effort, which was true, and which I always said first because it was always true first. What happened next was not something I engineered. Natalie is, at her core, a person who finds it genuinely difficult to contain enthusiasm for things she finds remarkable. I know this about her now. I didn't know it then. She turned around to find Daniel, who was standing nearby talking to my uncle. And she said, not loudly, but not quietly either, in the conversational register of someone sharing important news, "Daniel, did you know your sister founded ClearPath Community Health? The program in the province's equity report?" Daniel looked at her, then at me. My father, who was standing 3 feet behind Daniel refilling his drink, heard it. My mother came out of the living room at that exact moment with an empty tray. The kitchen was not large. Daniel said, "I knew she was involved in some community thing. I didn't know," and then he stopped because even as he said it, he heard how it sounded. My mother set the tray down on the counter. She looked at Natalie, then at me. The expression on her face was not the one I might have imagined as a child, in the way children sometimes imagine being seen. It was more complicated than satisfaction, more uncomfortable than recognition. It was the look of someone revising a document they thought was finished. She said, "What program?" Natalie, to her credit, read the room quickly after that, and let me speak for myself. I gave the short version. 3 years, 40+ volunteers, Peel region, provincial recognition, possible expansion funding in the next budget cycle. My father put his glass down. My Aunt Claire, who had drifted into the kitchen for more squares, heard the last 2 minutes of it and said, "Sophie, I didn't know any of this. Why didn't you say?" I said I hadn't found the right moment. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. He had the face of someone doing a difficult calculation. Then he said, quietly, "I'm sorry I didn't ask more." That was the thing that got me. Not my parents' silence. I had been insulating myself against that for years. It was Daniel saying that, simply, without deflection. A small sentence with real weight in it. My mother said, "We're very proud of you, Sophie." And I looked at her when she said it, and I thought about what it costs a person to say something true when they've been avoiding it for a long time. It didn't fix anything. I want to be honest about that, because I think there's a version of this story that wants to end with a bow tied neatly, with a transformed mother, and a tearful reconciliation, and a lesson learned. That's not what happened in that kitchen in Mississauga in January. What happened was smaller and more honest than that. My mother said she was proud of me, and I said thank you, and then Natalie asked if we should bring out the dessert trays, and we did. Later that evening, after most of the guests had gone, Daniel found me in the backyard. I'd stepped out for some air. It was cold enough that my breath came out in clouds, and the snow in the yard had that hard, packed quality it gets in late January. He stood beside me for a moment, without saying anything. Then he said, "I didn't know how much I wasn't paying attention until tonight." I said I knew. He said, "That's not an excuse. It's just what I'm sitting with." I said that was fair. We stood there for a while in the cold, not fixing anything, not pretending to, just standing in the same yard we'd grown up in, two people who had somehow arrived at 31 and 27 without really knowing each other. There's a particular grief in that. Not a dramatic grief, not one that announces itself, just a quiet mourning for the version of a relationship that never got the chance to happen. I allowed myself to feel it, standing there. I drove home that night on the 403, the city glittering cold out the windows. I had a voicemail from my charge nurse about a shift change. I had 2 texts from ClearPath volunteers about a clinic we were running in February. I had a message from Natalie, sent from the party, which said, "I hope tonight was okay. I may have overstepped. You've built something genuinely remarkable, and I don't think you get told that enough." I pulled into my apartment parking lot and I read that message twice. Then I called my closest friend Priya, who has known me since our first clinical placement and who has heard every version of this story over the years. When she answered, I said, "Something happened tonight." She said, "Tell me everything." So I did, sitting in my cold car in a parking lot in Etobicoke until the windows fogged and she was laughing at the part about the shortbread and I was crying a little at the part about Daniel in the backyard, and neither of us tried to rush the other part to get to the end. I don't know what changes from here. Maybe nothing changes quickly. Maybe my parents will find ways to be proud of me that actually reach me, or maybe they'll try and it'll come out crooked, the way things do when people start practicing something too late. Maybe Daniel and I will build something real, slowly, over dinners and phone calls, and the kind of ordinary time that real relationships are actually made of. Maybe Natalie and I will become the kind of sisters-in-law who send each other articles and meet for coffee and say the things we actually mean. What I know is this. I built something real, not to prove anything to anyone, not to earn a seat at a table I'd been excluded from, but because there were people in Brampton and Malton and Bramalea who needed something I could offer, and because it turned out that being invisible in one room for a long time makes you very good at seeing the people who are invisible in other rooms. I drove home that night and I slept better than I had in months, and the next morning, I got up and went back to work.